Good morning. Hi, everyone. Who's on here this morning? Hi. I'm in the comfort of my own home today, in the kitchen. Hi, Nicole and Ian. How are you? Hope the weather's nice for you in Apollo Bay. So we're going to be talking about gluten. So I've got some products here with me just from my pantry. That's why I'm doing it from home today. I've got my coffee, I've got my water. I'm all set up. So if you have any questions as we go along, just pop them in the comments field, and we can answer them as we go. So basically, we're going to talk about gluten today. What is gluten? It's been around now. It's been around in the mainstream, I guess, for over 10 years, probably closer to 15 years when it really started to emerge. And there was a lot of skepticism around whether gluten was impacting certain people's health. And it really started when, I guess, celiac disease started to emerge. So we'll get into what is celiac disease and how that's different to gluten sensitivity or non-celiac gluten sensitivity and how that really came about as well. But first, we really just need to understand gluten. I don't know about you guys, but when I first I was going through my own health issues at the time. This was probably about 14 years ago, and I started to discover foods as medicine, I guess, because Western medicine wasn't working for me at the time. And this is when gluten really came to in my world, and I started to discover what gluten really was. And there was a lot of confusion in my mind as to what was gluten, what wasn't gluten, what was wheat, what's the difference between each. So some people out there might not know the difference between a gluten product and a non-gluten product. So we'll keep it simple, and we'll start with what is gluten. So essentially it is a sticky protein that's found in barley, wheat and rye products. It makes up 80% of the amino acid found in those grains. So barley, wheat and rye are grains. So gluten's job as a protein is to help food maintain its shape, and it acts like a glue holding the food together. So if you think about white bread and any form of bread that's got that condensed stickiness to it, then it's most likely gluten that's holding it together. If you've ever had gluten-free bread from, say, Coles or Aldi or something like that, you'll notice that it can fall apart quite easily. Okay, so that's because the gluten's in it, the gluten protein holds it together. So when it comes to wheat, and this is where I got stuck early in my years, was wheat products. So what comes out of wheat are things like couscous, semolina, farro, if you've heard of farro, spelt also, and kamut is another form of wheat. So early on in my years, I thought, no, I'm not going to eat white bread. I'm going to eat spelt bread, not realizing that came from wheat as well. So it eventually was going to have the same impact on my body as eating any other wheat bread or white bread. But also you'll find wheat in things like breads, obviously, muffins and noodles. So it's really important, I guess, from there to understand that wheat can be made into several different forms of grains, and we can find that in lots of different foods. So good to start getting into the habit of reading the labels and the nutritional values and the ingredients on certain products. And I've got some, as I mentioned, I've got some products here today. Just I haven't done the shopping yet, but I've got some things that I've pulled out from the pantries just to show you that are gluten-free and the difference between some of the products. So so gluten is found in those forms of wheat, rye, and barley. So where gluten is not found, okay, is oats, and we'll talk about oats in a second. Quinoa. I don't know about you, but I used to pronounce it when I first heard it as quinoa. It's not quinoa, it's quinoa. Rice and corn. So those products do not have gluten in them. However, the food processing techniques can contaminate these products with gluten. They use the same equipment. They're used in the same manufacturing factories. So gluten can be certainly contaminated, particularly when dealing with things like oats. So whilst oats doesn't really have gluten in it, gluten can be found in oats because it's coming from the same equipment used for all sorts of wheat. So it's really good just to keep that in mind. And you know, I've got some oats here, gluten-free oats. So yeah, best to buy, I guess, gluten-free oats if you do find that you have either particularly celiac disease or are gluten sensitive. So to keep that in mind. Gluten, highly processed. So in addition to wheat, barley and rye, gluten is also used as a chemical additive. So you will find it in processed meats, you'll find it in salad dressings, you'll find it in chips, crackers, beers, soy sauce, soup mixes, any packaging product, you most likely might find gluten in it. Because it has been created to be used as a chemical additive for that product. Okay, so it's not just in the grain form. It's been manufactured and created into a chemical additive form found in lots of those other products. So really be mindful. Again, if you are celiac, you definitely do need to go gluten-free on all products. And if you're gluten sensitive, you know, be very mindful as well, looking out for gluten-free products. So let's get into what is celiac. So celiac disease is essentially an immune reaction to eating gluten, which causes an inflammatory response that damages the small intestine, the lining of the small intestine. Okay, so this is an autoimmune condition essentially that damages the tissues in the area where nutrients are absorbed in the small intestine. So there's two problems with that. One, the lining of the small intestine is damaged. Okay, and so if you think about the lining of the small intestine, remember the small intestine's where you know, food particles get churned and digestive enzymes are created through the digestive process, and we're breaking down all the food that we've eaten in that in the small intestine area. So the lining is really important because what happens is if this is the lining of the stomach and it's nice and thick and tight, nothing can get through it. With gluten and celiac disease, the body recognizes gluten as an invader. Okay, so it causes inflammation, immune response occurs, and it starts to inflame and damage the tissue of the lining. So what happens is it thins out and it starts to open up, allowing food particles to pass through the lining of the stomach. So those food particles are not yet digested properly. They're not broken down properly. So what happens is that once it goes through the lining of the stomach, it actually enters the bloodstream, entering the rest of the body, beginning to damage other systems of the body. So that involves things like your nervous system, hormones. So your endocrine system is impacted as well. The skin, as an organ is impacted, going through the bloodstream. The cardiovascular system also can be impacted by that damage occurred to the lining of the stomach. So that's problem number one. Problem number two is the malabsorption. So nutrients are not being absorbed correctly as a result of damaged lining and undigested foods. So we might be eating, vegetables, and we might be eating all these really good foods, but we're not absorbing them properly as a result of this immune reaction which is occurring in the tummy. So with celiac disease, it is like really sinister, and some of the symptoms, if a person is tested positive to celiac, the symptoms are pretty horrendous. So things like bloating, diarrhea, constipation, chronic headaches, joint pain, brain fog, cramping, severe abdominal pain, mood swings. Someone who has tested positive to celiac disease, the smallest bit of gluten contamination can cause any one of those symptoms. So they've really got to be quite careful of that. If left untreated, and we just keep, some people just sort of keep living with it, thinking that there's nothing that can be done for it, it can lead into more sinister and severe health conditions. Remember, it affects, over time, it'll affect a lot of our body systems, our other body systems. So really important for celiac people to stay clear of any form of gluten. So in Western medicine, it was believed, certainly about 15 years ago, you either were you had celiac disease or you did not. It was pretty black and white back then. So if you tested positive to celiac, then you were to stay away from gluten. If you did not test positive to celiac, then it was deemed that you didn't need to avoid gluten. However, a new term emerged there was a study done, you can find the study on PubMed, in about 2014. It was a literature review showing that people were experiencing problems after consuming gluten and wheat. So even though they were testing negative to celiac testing, they were experiencing a lot of problems after ingesting gluten and wheat. So then the term non-celiac gluten sensitivity came about. And this basically puts people with non-celiac gluten sensitivity along a spectrum. So they're not celiac, but they are experiencing some level of sensitivity when it comes to gluten. Now, every individual is different, so it's not the same for each, and the symptoms are going to be different, as well as to a different degree for each individual. But what they did notice was, after removing gluten for several months, they were noticeably better. So again, that's where the term came about of non-celiac gluten sensitivity. And I, through my own personal experience, found the exact same. I was tested for celiac disease. I knew very well that I did not. No gluten in chocolate apples. You know what? We still got that, Donna. Delicious. Sorry, I just saw Donna's post there, and she kindly bought me a chocolate-coated, Rocky Road chocolate-coated apple, which was very calorific but very delicious at the same time. So thanks, Donna. I had to do sort of 5Ks on the treadmill the next day, much to my despise. But anyway, so going back to gluten, yes. So I got tested for gluten for celiac disease. I knew I wasn't. again, this is going back 15 years ago, but I was severely impacted with eczema at the time. And I might have might go through my story one day with you and show you some photos on how severe my eczema was, and how that led me into learning about gluten, learning about foods, and essentially discovering that I had a leaky gut syndrome, which gluten was causing, or one of the reasons I had leaky gut syndrome, which was that lining of the stomach being damaged and thinned out, causing leaky gut, and gluten played a huge part in that. So you might not have, any skin problems or anything like that, but some key warning signs that you might be gluten sensitive are things like any form of digestive issues, so bloating, gas, diarrhea, constipation, feeling uncomfortable after eating. So any form of digestive issue that you notice. Food allergies. Okay, if you find that within half an hour of eating a food, you react to something, a food that you've eaten, okay, then just think about gluten sensitivity. Autoimmune disease, which can include things like arthritis, joint pain, thyroid conditions, chronic fatigue syndrome, even ADHD has been, there's studies now showing remember I mentioned that gluten can affect every body system within the body. So, the nervous system, one of the symptoms is brain fog as well, hormones. So all that can have an impact on ADHD as well. Nutrient deficient, if you are nutrient deficient, even anemic, so iron deficient, you might be sensitive to gluten. It is considered an anti-nutrient because it's very hard to digest. And it binds to vitamins and minerals, therefore making it unabsorbable. So remember, if we are gluten sensitive, there's two problems. One, food particles are getting through the lining of the tummy, and two, we are not absorbing nutrients very well. Okay, so that's the difference, I guess, between celiac disease, where we do need to stay very clear and away from all gluten and wheat products. Even contamination with a spatula or a fork or a knife can have some of those really serious symptoms on an individual. And gluten sensitivity on the spectrum of being sensitive to and reacting to gluten, causing an inflammatory response within the gut. So inflammation is known in almost all conditions. Okay, so if that's the case, then seriously consider gluten as something to remove from your food and diet. Okay, so the solution is really to stay away from gluten for at least 3 months. So once you've started to remove gluten, and it really becomes a case of removing it completely, not just having a little bit, okay? Because the way the immune system works is, even if you have that little bit and you've reduced it, it will still recognize it as an invader and have the same inflammatory response. Its job is to attack and keep the body safe from what it thinks is an invader. Okay, so if you're going to attempt staying away from gluten, make sure it is 100%, not just a little bit. Then you've got alternatives, and I've got some alternatives here to show you. So alternatives are things like almond flour, coconut flour, brown rice flour, millet, quinoa flour. If you're a baker and you want to use alternative types of flours, these are really good options. Tapioca, amaranth. What else is there? Pecan meal. We use coconut flour, which I'll just show you. Yeah, so this one here, coconut flour as an alternative. You can get gluten-free pretty much everything now. We've even got, gluten-free breadcrumbs. Quinoa looks like this. You can get it from Aldi, okay? It's not that expensive, so you don't have to break the bank to improve your health. Other options for noodles would be, there's this black rice noodles. Other options for pastas. This one's my favourite, I guess. There are some pretty yucky type of pastas that are made from corn that are gluten-free. They're very yellow, which they're not to my liking. But this one I really like. So this one's called Bon Appetit. And just so you know, this is made from, I think it was made from tapioca from memory. It's in Italian. Oh, rice flour, 87% rice flour. Okay, so it's made from rice flour. And you'll find it's a lot lighter on the tummy than the white pasta that you're probably used to. In terms of sauces, we use tamari sauce. So you can see here it's gluten-free and it's a type of soy sauce. It's fermented. And so that's a great option. In terms of crackers, you can get gluten-free crackers. There it is, gluten-free, to have with your Friday night date night, cheese and crackers. Better option. And then you've also got, corn chips that are gluten-free. There's a whole gluten-free aisle now. So, there's a whole gluten-free aisle now. So you can pretty much find anything without breaking the bank. Aldi's another really good option as well, which is cheaper than Coles and Woolies. Okay, so I've been gluten-free for well over 13 or 14 years now, and that's not to say that I'm not celiac, so I don't need to stay away from it 100% of the time. If I go out for dinner, I do opt for, and I do ask them for the gluten-free option. But if they don't have it, and I was to consume some form of gluten, whether it be in the sauce that they produce or otherwise, I will not react, okay? Because my body at the moment, right now, has no inflammation or very, very little inflammation. So I'm not going to react too much to it. However, if I was to consume large amount of gluten, my digestion would react. I would feel bloated. I'd probably feel constipated until the next morning, and I'd probably feel like I'm hungover. Okay, so that's some of the symptoms that I feel as a result, having been off gluten for so many years and really only consuming it on, we'll call it, special occasions. That's some of the minor symptoms that I experience and manage along the way. Hi, Carla. Where is gluten-free pasta from? I get this one from Coles. I haven't really been able to find this particular one. It's called Bon Appetit, and it's in the health aisle section in Coles. As I said, there are other types of gluten-free pastas. I've tried a few. That's the one I like. It's light on the tummy. It's made from rice flour mostly, rather than corn. So yeah, it's my personal preference. So I hope that. Actually, keep one more thing is, if you do find you've got some digestive issues, or you want to give this no gluten a go. Obviously, these alternatives are great options, but also supplements will really help. So the kind of supplements I'd be recommending are things like, one, digestive enzymes to help break down the food. Remember, if the lining of your small intestine is damaged, and it's thinning out and food particles are getting through, then we're not digesting correctly. So enzymes are not being created to break down the food. Second thing is probiotics. I still take a probiotic every single day. So probiotics to enhance really the function of the digestive system and create that good environment for the gut. Fermented foods help with that as well. So fermented foods are quite popular now, things like sauerkraut, kefir. My social drink is kombucha, not really for the purpose of fermentation. It's just an alternative to alcohol. The other thing is a multivitamin with minerals is really important. So remember, if we're not absorbing our nutrients correctly, then we need some support in the interim, which a really good multivitamin will help with that. The other thing to think about is there's a great, it's called the GAPS diet, and it's derived from the specific carbohydrate diet. So if you want to clean your gut out, there's a couple of products to do that with, but also begin to follow what's called the GAPS diet, which is the gut and psychological syndrome diet, derived from the specific carbohydrate diet. Okay, they're essentially the same, but organic sort of chicken and meats and vegetables, bone broth, things like that really help. Yeah, I think that's all I had to tell you about that. But you can research it, GAPS diet or specific carbohydrate diet. Have a go. If you've got any gluten or you suspect you have any problems with gluten, happy to have a chat with you anytime. So I hope that you found this information useful. If you've got any other questions, let me know. Yeah, Carl, I'm trying to go gluten-free at the moment, not 100%, but cutting it right back. Good on you, yeah. So, just take a mental note. How do you feel after you've eaten something with gluten? If you are highly sensitive, you'll generally react within the first hour, within the half an hour, really, of consuming that product. Sometimes reactions can take up to 72 hours. Okay, so just be really mindful of what you're eating and how it's responding to your body. And then on the flip side, once you remove gluten, and gluten isn't the only culprit, I guess, when it comes to inflammatory response. We do have things like dairy as well, is another thing that I certainly removed those years ago as well. Shellfish is another one, and eggs. Some people react very highly to eggs as well. So just keeping those products and food groups in mind. Thanks for joining me this morning, guys. Hope you have a great weekend, and I'll see you next week.